My name is Nikki Riley. I'm the vice chair. I'll be leading tonight's Planning Commission meeting. And Julie, would you please take a roll call? Are you on? Are you not? Are you on?
No.
Can you hear me now?
Hello? Oh, I'm here.
Commissioner Hall.
Here.
Vice Chair Riley.
Here.
Commissioner Gove.
Here.
Great. And now I'd like to invite the audience to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We're going to get this right.
I know, you got a crib sheet there. Come on, you're how old? Should just be in your head. Okay. Now we are on to public comment. This is the opportunity for members of the audience to come up to the podium and speak on anything that's not on the agenda this evening. You have 3 minutes, and we ask that you state your name, and then you can give Julie over here your name card if you choose to speak. So please come up to the podium if there's anything you'd like to comment on this evening. Not on the agenda, correct. Yep. Okay, I don't see any public commenters, so we'll close that portion of the agenda this evening. Let's move on to the approval of the minutes. Does anyone have any comments or questions or corrections for the October 15 Planning Commission meeting minutes?
I don't. I'll make a motion to approve the October meeting minutes.
Great. Do we have a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Yes.
Or should I do a roll call? I get this down.
Commissioner Tarnay.
Yes.
Commissioner Hall.
Yes.
Vice Chair Riley.
Yes.
Commissioner Gove.
Abstain.
Great. Okay. Now we're going to move to the public hearing portion of the evening. And before we move forward with item 6.1, I did want to share with my fellow commissioners kind of my thoughts on protocol for the evening. It's pretty much the same as we've been doing in the past, but what I'd like to ask of you is this. We will proceed with staff presentation, then we'll have the applicant's presentation. I will open public comment, and then I'll close the public comment. We'll provide the applicant an opportunity to make a response, and then I will have the commissioners able to pose questions, and I'd like to frame it so that we do our questions to staff first, ideally, and then if there's questions for the applicant, we go in that direction, but I'd like to try to keep things somewhat contained between staff and applicant if possible, and I recognize it's hard to sometimes compartmentalize the questions that way, but just in terms of flow and not having to have the applicant up and down or standing at the podium for a long period of time, that was the process I'd like to follow this evening. I also wanted to mention that I'd like everyone to make any disclosures prior to our staff presentation portion. So if you have any disclosures to make, we'll do that right now. This is for item 6.1, the Donner Lake Village Resort. Did anyone speak with anyone? Okay. Yumi, I think we're ready for your presentation.
All right, good evening. We'll be talking about the Donner Lake Village Building E amendment tonight. To give you a brief overview of the location, the Donner Lake Village is located close to the west end of Donner Lake, just west of the Donner Lake Road and Donner Pass Road intersection. It is actually made up of 2 parcels. There's a parcel to the north that's primarily just parking, and then there's a parcel to the south that has 5 buildings on it that constitute the Donner Lake Village. This is located in the general plan designation, a commercial general plan designation in the general commercial zoning district, and Building E parcel is just the building parcel shown here. Close-up of the site that with the buildings, there are, as you can see, 5 buildings. Building A is primarily a commercial, professional office building, and then the remaining buildings are, B, C, and D are motel condominiums, and then Building E is currently considered a motel bar, lounge, conference room. And then there is also Donner Lake Marina on site as well. So to give you a little bit of project history, this project has been here for quite a while. It was originally approved in 1973 by the Nevada County Planning Commission. It included 6 buildings at the time, with 2 buildings, or Building B being a future building, and then Building F never being built, which was located across the street at that parking parcel. So as you can see there, Building A has restaurant, office, and commercial space. Building C has motel units. Building D has retail, and then Building E was approved originally as a retail sporting goods store. In 1980, there was an amendment to this project. It was a use permit and tentative map to convert Building B, convert the first floor from retail to 10 motel units, to add more motel units to this site, to this building, and then to convert to Building E, which is the subject of tonight's discussion, from retail to conference room, lounge, and bar. In 1984, there was another amendment which just looked at Building B and split that 2 units within Building B into 2 additional units, and added 2 motel units to Building B for a total of 27 units. And then just in 2017, there was some on-site improvements to improve the parking lot and circulation, and include a restroom on site. So tonight, the project applicant is requesting to convert Building E, which is originally a sporting goods retail site, and is currently a conference room / motel lounge bar, to 2 short-term rental motel condominiums. And just as reference, a motel condominium is a unit that is owned by an individual who can stay in the unit for short periods of time, 30 days or less, and when not used by the owner, can be included in the public pool of available motel rooms in the Donner Lake Village. The 2 units are both approximately 2,000 square feet. It's pretty much a split of the units. There's minor exterior modifications proposed to the building, and then a tentative map to split the building into 2. So the land use permits required today are a use permit amendment due to the underlying approval. Generally, a motel condominium is just an outright permitted use within general commercial, but because there is an underlying use permit, we are amending that tonight. And then a tentative map to subdivide Building E into 2 units. So this is just a floor plan showing what's existing. So in actuality, while it is approved for a motel lounge, conference room, bar, it is actually being currently used for more professional office uses, which is not in compliance with the previous requirements. So the proposal tonight will bring it into compliance if approved, by approving a new use that is in compliance with a new approval, if so chosen tonight. So as you can see, there is a conference room over here, meeting room, and then there's a library and office and kitchen. The proposed condominium units are being split down the middle, essentially, and then there's just a small second floor space for, I believe, this unit. And then there's minor exterior modifications just to one component of the building on this side. The only item that the staff found was something to be considered is parking. In general, we found that the proposed use is less intense than the previously approved use and the existing unpermitted uses. So we found that with the conference room, there are 34 parking spaces required currently. We found that the existing unpermitted uses would have 14 required parking spaces, and with this new motel condominium use, only 2 parking spaces would be required. So it is a significant decrease in the parking requirements. So we found that the parking was consistent with the requirements. Additionally, since the original publication of the staff report, we added an amended resolution, which I believe was on the website. Staff is recommending a new condition, condition number 17, to add that prior to recordation of the final map, the applicant shall provide to the town written evidence that all requirements of the Donner Lake Village CCNRs pertaining to the addition of units and/or the conversion of buildings from one use to another have been complied with, including without limitation any requirement that majority consent of unit owners be obtained. That's pretty much legalese to ensure that everyone's on board with that change. So tonight, it's a pretty straightforward discussion. Staff is recommending adoption of resolution number 2019-26, determining the project categorically exempt from CEQA per section 15061B3, approving the use permit amendment and tentative map. So if you have any questions, please feel free.
Great, thank you, Yumi. Well, is the applicant making a presentation this evening?
He is here, Jerry is here. I don't know if he would like to give a presentation.
See if we're on. My primary purpose for being here this evening is, of course, to answer any questions that you might have, with two additional comments. One, to give you a little understanding of the circumstances that why I'm here tonight. The building E was formerly owned by John Baker. John was a lifelong friend of mine. John bought the building in 2004, I think is the right date. The use that, the primary purpose of it, was to house his company, which was an educational travel company that led, I think, middle school and high school kids to educational tours throughout the state and the West Coast. Fast forward to Christmas Eve 2016, John was in Maui with his fiancee and then his wife, Tammy. They got married Christmas Eve day in 2016 with the anticipation of a 2-week honeymoon on Maui. That second week, John suffered a heart attack and died. So it complicated his estate in that he had 2 grown children. Now the estate involved 3 people, and that process to work through it took almost 2 years. His wife, Tammy, who my family has known not as long as John, but a significant amount of years, and the trauma you can well understand. In that 2-year period, or following that 2-year period, Tammy was one of the assets that John had, Building E. She was offered that in addition to other things. Tammy didn't believe that she had the financial resources to handle the building, and she asked my wife and myself. We're from Southern California, but if we would buy a half interest in the building, she would then move forward with it. We, of course, agreed to do that. And again, a part of the distribution or settlement of the estate, the business that John had that was housed in the building was sold to a third party who moved the business to Reno. So we end up with basically a blank slate in terms of the building. I first went to the board of the HOA, made a presentation to them as to what we would like to do, just to get their feedback. The board unanimously supported what we were doing, which then brought me to Yumi. She asked me to make a preliminary presentation or application, which we did. That feedback then led to the formal presentation and proposal. The second item that I wanted to briefly tell you about was I thought I was up to speed with regards to understanding the building, and you'll see on what we call Unit A, there is a deck outside of the unit that almost fronts the lake. We do own that deck. In front of our, what we're calling Unit B, is a large patio area. I thought that was also ours, but last week I was told that, no, that's common area. That is on Unit A. We want to have the entrance coming off of the deck into the unit. We wanted to do the same thing on Unit B, but because there's no way that we can guarantee that there is any significant entry type structures that we could put in that common area. So last week I asked my architect to study, and it's where the entrance is now, is we were going to remove that entrance, which is at the front of the building on Unit B. The architect is studying that. I'll be back home tomorrow and be visiting with her on Thursday. But it may well be, because I spoke with the manager of the HOA, and he said it may be problematic with regards to that common area and having an entrance to Unit B from that location. To do it from where the current location to the building is, it'll change the footprint, no doubt, a little bit. And so I had identified that to Yumi. I said, when I have that, I will forward that to her. If it's in substantial conformance with what we're showing here today, which I believe it will, then, or if not, then it may well need to come to back to the commission, but I think she can make that determination for us. Those were my two main points. So the other is simply to answer any questions that you might have of me. By the way, the sale that we agreed to buy half interest closed the 1st of January of this year. So it's really been an educational process for me for this last year, particularly not being living in close proximity. But I think we've covered most of the issues that might be concerning the property. So any questions you might have of me, I'll be happy to see if I can answer them.
Great. Thank you. If you wouldn't mind sitting close to the podium, that way when we do open the conversation to questions, you'll be accessible.
Right here?
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you. I would open to public comment, but I'm wondering if we need Yumi to kind of reflect on what was presented, or with regards to the deck and access, and provide more information.
Generally, our preference is to look at architecture changes at the Planning Commission level if possible. There are minor changes that we do look at the staff level after Planning Commission approval. If the Planning Commission is comfortable without looking at it, there could be some direction provided to staff or a condition added to the staff, to the resolution to allow staff to work with the applicant team to work on the actual architecture of the entrance.
So the thought is that the entry might change from what we're looking at based on kind of the legalities of the common area?
That sounds like what he's saying, yes.
Okay. I'm going to open it up to public comment if the rest of the commission is okay with that. So at this point, I'm going to open the hearing to public comment, and we ask that you come up to the podium. You state your name. You have 3 minutes to speak, and we want you to speak on behalf of this agenda item, not any other items that are before you this evening. So if you're interested in speaking, please come up to the podium. And I don't see anyone. So I'm going to go ahead and close the public comment portion of the hearing. And we're going to move forward now with questions for staff. Dave, I'm going to start with you. Do you have any questions for Yumi?
My question is about the rental periods of 30 days or less. Like 30 days or less per what? Is that quarterly, annually?
Just at a time. So that's what all short-term rentals and hotels, that's their model.
So if somebody wanted to buy this condominium, they could live in it for 30 days, rent it out for 1 day, and then come back and live in it for 30 days.
That's correct. But I would say the transient occupancy tax would apply for that time. Is it just
For all the time, or for the 1 day that it's rented?
For
Should be
all the time.
all the time.
It is a motel. We consider it more of a motel. If there wasn't a transient occupancy tax, then it would be, and it was greater than 30 days, it'd be a residential use.
That's my only question.
Okay. Jerusha, do you have any questions?
My only question is, it sounds like you talked to the homeowners association, but the conference lounge bar uses, is that any sort of amenity to the other homeowners? And, it just feels kind of weird that this motel is getting inserted in like a public space.
It was intended to be an amenity to the rest of the motel condominium users. It was intended as a whole for Donner Lake Village to be a mixed-use center. So that is something that we had some discussion on. However, motel condominium isn't allowed use within the general commercial zone, and if the HOA, the Donner Lake Village owners didn't have an issue with it, then we thought it was an appropriate use within the zoning district.
Thank you.
Susie?
So did they do that vote already for the CCNRs? Did they get the majority approval?
As part of their initial application, the applicant team did provide a letter from the HOA saying that they did support this change. And he could speak to it more if you would like.
No, just making sure that it's already been done. It's not something that happens after this meeting.
No, he has I don't know if there's an actual formal application, but it's the initial submittal did have HOA support.
Okay, and then stepping back to Dave's question, so the person who owns it has to pay a transient occupancy tax even when they themselves are staying there?
That's correct.
Okay, and so that's, because my question was, this. It seems like it's kind of a fancy way to get around part of the affordable housing type of requirements that we have, but then they are paying a significant amount in the transient occupancy tax.
Yes, I guess that could be something that you would consider as part of your discussion. I would say that in the original pre-application or original discussions with the applicant team, they did look at potentially changing this to a residential use, but the requirements of the residential use made it was a little too onerous for the applicant team to meet, or they didn't desire to meet the requirements, mostly the covered parking requirement. But they thought that this wasn't something that they could use and would want to get approved. But the applicant team could speak to that a little more if you'd like.
And I guess it's just curious to me because didn't we just see a report at the town about how low hotel occupancy rates are?
Generally, hotel rates within our community are 50%, and I think that's a general hotel statistic in a lot of resort communities. We do have a lot of peak seasons, but we do have a lot of low seasons, including times between weekends. It is, I would say that it's up to the applicant team to decide what is most economically beneficial to them as a property owner.
So, yeah, it's just hard. I would really like to see residential units, although a 1,900 square foot one bedroom is probably not what I'm looking for. But thank you.
Okay. Let's see. I had one comment, and then I wanted to refer to Jan Zabrisky's comment. Are you aware of, was this space utilized previously by visitors? I know there was some discussion about kind of it serving as an amenity. But
So it was approved most recently as a motel lounge, bar, conference room. So there's a higher usage with the conference room specifically. The other two uses are more internal to the motel use, but that's just what it was approved for. It's my understanding that that's not what it's been used for most recently.
more an office.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And then this might be for the applicant, but I had a question about waste disposal and bare receptacles. If this is a motel unit, is there a procedure or place where the waste would go?
They would be using the common area waste facilities. They are required to meet state requirements for waste storage. I would say that I'm not sure if there's existing trash enclosures out there to ensure that it is safe from bears, but that the applicant may know more information about the actual trash enclosures that are out on site.
Okay. And then I know you received Jan's question. I don't know if you have an answer regarding, he was interested in knowing the expected annual change in GHG emissions that would result from the conversion proposed in this agenda item. Or if I should direct that to the applicant.
I did forward it to him, and he he could provide you some information. I think probably our response would be very similar in that both the proposed use is much less intense than the existing use or the approved use. So the idea behind that would be that that would reduce the greenhouse gas emissions of the site.
Okay. And then my other question is, as motel units, is there a limitation on the number of people who can use these units at any one time? You know, like a Airbnb or a VRBO where, there's been some issues where people pack people in and there's many more times the people than the unit can accommodate. Is there any rule or oversight?
The planning division doesn't have specific occupancy requirements. There is building code requirements that would apply to the site, and then I would probably defer to the HOA's requirements for how many people would be in each unit.
Okay. Does anyone have any more questions for staff? We'll open the questions to the applicant. Jerry, if you wouldn't mind coming up to the podium and we'll ask you some questions.
Sure.
That would be great. Dave, did you have any questions?
How long has the previous use of the office space, how long has that been going on? And when was the last time it was an amenity, conference room, et cetera, for the rest of the community there?
Just based on my exposure for the amount of time that I've had, the only thing that I know is that as of 2004, I know that John put his company in the building. What happened, and that there was no lounge bar at all ever under his ownership. Prior to that, I don't believe there was either, but I can't say that as a fact, but my gut tells me that it was never used for that purpose.
Thank you.
Jerusha, did you have any questions for the applicant?
My question is, how do you plan?
Oh, excuse me. Jim might know the answer better than I.
Would you like, you may go up to the podium and please state your name and then you may proceed.
My name is Jim Porter. And I can tell you that this use prior to when Jerry owned this, or the family owned it, this was Rob Eskridge's conference center, and as a historical, but for a long time. And it was never an amenity for the homeowners association. And I've been hoping to be able to say this tonight, as a historical footnote, after the election to have a town council, the very first meeting was the very next day after the vote in this room, a conference room. And we all sat around, and Kathleen Egan, the newly elected mayor, said infamously, at least I thought so now what do we do? So to answer your question, it's the use has been a conference center for many, many years before Mr. Baker owned it.
Great. Well, thank you, Jim. We always appreciate a little historical,
I didn't know
lesson.
Jim was that old.
Okay.
Great. My question is, how do you intend to use these 2 units?
Well, the association, through the management company, has a rental facility for the motel units, and I think there are close to, I want to say, Yumi, you can correct me, but if there are 64 units, at least 40 of them are in the rental pool managed by the association. And I believe they do have regulations with regards to the number of people that come into units that they rent. Our intention is to use their rental facility to gain occupancy. Use by the owners, I can tell you, it's too far away for me to reasonably come and use it. So I'm looking at it strictly as an investment as a rental motel unit through the management company of the HOA.
Thank you.
Susie, do you have any questions?
I don't think so. Thank you.
I have a few. I wanted to follow up on Jan Zabriskie's written comment about the GHG emissions. Did you do any research into that?
Well, my response was that I can only respond as basically a layman. I'm not an expert at all. But really what you're talking about is carbon dioxide emissions caused by automobiles. Under John's ownership, he had employees, as many as 9, 12 months out of the year, every 5 to 6 days out of. So the traffic in and out, number of cars, was significant, as well as the usage of heating and electrical. It is so seasonal, I'm told, with the rental activity that the 2 cars that would be involved would only be involved at 100% occupancy probably 6 months out of the year. So the math to me, is my response was, there is a significant reduction in the carbon dioxide. And that, I think, is the primary. I interpreted that as being the carbon dioxide being the issue of the email.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that makes sense. I mean, maybe some of the appliances, but overall, probably the vehicle miles traveled back and forth. And then my other question, you had mentioned that the 2 cars. Is it your sense that, I had the question for Yumi about the number of users, and she had replied that there might be limitations within the development about how many people could rent this unit at any one time.
Yes, and I've tried to address, I think the association with the management company that takes the reservation, they were not going to be Airbnb, or it's going to be through them. They will handle the check-in. They will know how many people are there.
Okay.
We are not interested in large groups of people,
Great.
believe me.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. And then I went and visited the site, and I was struck by the building. It seemed like it was a single story. It didn't seem like a 2-story structure, but per the plans, it looks like there's a second story. And my question is there any windows or ventilation for that upper level?
Yes, it is a single-story building. It has a tremendous length and pitch to it. So I think at ground level up maybe 30 feet as a guess. So in that, there are in the middle of the property, there is an area that will accommodate what I call a mezzanine, but a second floor, if you will. And that was done at the original construction of the building. So that potential is there simply because of the pitch of the roof line.
Is that like a loft, and it would be open to below? Are you aware?
No, the one that is the bedroom in Unit A, or the room in Bedroom A, is a full room. There is exterior access by a door that is existing to the outside in case of fire. The ventilation, the heating, air, everything is ventilated in that room, so it can be a standalone.
So there is a means of egress. I mean, obviously, I don't think you would get it signed off if you didn't have that egress, but it looks like there's a door. I didn't see that in my visit. There's a door to an upper level door to the outside.
That's correct.
Okay.
Do we have any elevation drawings of this?
No, we have, I think I forwarded photographs to, but I have limited access to the original plans. When I say original, the early 1980s when this was constructed. I've seen the plans to it. I don't know that I have all the plans.
But proposed elevations on, is there any proposed elevations on what your architect is wanting?
No, we're not. One of the requirements of the HOA, which I agree with, is they did not want to touch the outside. The only place that we did touch the outside elevation was what's the original entrance to Unit B. We were going to substitute that door for a window, and we showed that on the elevation. That's the only elevation change, which they did not have a problem with. It's just a glass door changed to a glass window. That's the second floor door there to the Unit A.
Oh.
So we would not even be.
It certainly is a door, isn't it?
Yes. If we resort back to Plan B of the original entrance being still remaining that entrance, then there would be no elevation changes whatsoever on the site.
Like some woodpeckers.
And
Okay.
I might also add that the study that I asked the architect to do, that's within the confines of the lot line that has been shown. That would not change. That stays in place. It's just working within that wall or those walls.
Okay, well, thank you. Are there any
That's the
more
entrance to
questions? Oh,
Unit B there.
Okay. Any more questions from the commission? No? Okay, great. Thank you very much, and you may have a seat.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Do you guys have any more questions for staff before we move to deliberations? No? Okay. At this point, we'll open the discussion to deliberation. Would anyone like to begin? Dave, you look interested.
I don't see any reason why we wouldn't approve this. I would like to add language that minor architectural changes within the existing footprint of the building be reviewed at the staff level, so that this does not need to come back to us.
Great. How do you both feel about that? Good? Any other thoughts?
Just a comment. I agree. I think it's something we should move forward with. I will mention that I think it feels very awkward. Just, it looks like a public building in a residential setting, and it seems like it'll function in a slightly strange way because everything funnels towards that building. But yeah, I guess that's their choice.
Yeah, I walked around the site 2 times trying to figure out if I didn't think I was seeing the right building. I thought, oh, that's single story, must not be the right one. And then I went home and confirmed on the plans, no, that was indeed the building. But I agree, but I don't think it's really within our purview on that. Susie?
just have to say I'm not thrilled by another short-term rental. I feel like it drives up our housing costs and makes it harder for us to get affordable housing. But I don't think that there's anything particularly wrong with this.
Right. We can't force them to make it a workforce housing duplex, right?
Darn.
Okay. Would anyone like to make a motion?
Sure. I'll make a motion to adopt resolution number 2019-26, determine the project categorically exempt from CEQA, and approving the use permit amendment and tentative map based on the recommended findings and subject to the recommended conditions of approval, plus the additional condition regarding that the minor architectural changes can be processed through staff.
Second.
Okay, Julie, may we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Tarnay,
Yes.
Commissioner Hall,
Yes.
Vice Chair Riley,
Yes.
Commissioner Gove.
Yes.
And just as a note, the appeal period ends at 5:00 p.m. on November 29th.
Great, thank you. And now we're going to move forward with agenda item 6.2. This is the Martis Valley Quarry second one-year review. And before Jenna begins her presentation, I'd like to ask the commissioners to make any disclosures that you might have regarding meetings or calls or emails that you feel the public should be aware of.
I do have a friend that lives up near one of the sound testing sites on Royal Way. I did send her a text and ask if she was in any way affected. I talked to Jenna first, and she said it's okay to do fact-finding, and her comment was fairly minimal. She said possibly some dust, but not a lot of effect.
Great, thank you for that. Okay, Jenna?
Great, thank you, and good evening. So as you mentioned earlier, what we're doing tonight is the second of two required, what are one-year reviews for the Martis Valley Quarry. I'll talk a little bit about the difference that we've had over the past 2 years later in my presentation. So for those who may not be familiar with this location, what you see what you see in red here in the middle of the slide are the outlines of the existing Martis Valley Quarry. So this is off of Jorger Drive. This is a sort of zoomed in aerial photo taken from the noise quarterly report. So as you drive along Jorger, the first part of the quarry that you'll see is the asphalt plant, and then sort of toward the rear of the property, that's where the aggregate or rock plant is located. So I talked a little bit about this in my staff report. For those who may not have been on the commission last year, I just wanted to provide kind of a very quick overview. The Teichert team is here tonight. They can certainly elaborate on this if they'd like. This is a permit sort of like the one we just discussed that goes back to the days of Nevada County. This was a use permit that was approved in 1983, really for a number of different uses, including an open pit mine and then an asphalt batch plant. And what's gone on since then is we inherited that use permit when the town incorporated in 1993, and we have taken over monitoring and administration of the quarry and the associated use permit. And then I won't go into too much detail. This is all in the staff report. There have been a number of amendments that have occurred to that 1983 permit, including some off-site processing, expansions, and additional mitigation measures that have been imposed on the use permit. So really what this means is this is a project that the town has oversight on that we inherited from Nevada County. Want to talk a little bit about kind of this review process for those who may not be familiar with it. So going back to the 80s, as part of the use permit, the county imposed a 5-year review cycle. So every 5 years, the county and now the town are required to revisit the quarry operations and ensure that all of the conditions that were imposed with the initial use permit, that the project and the quarry are still in compliance with those conditions. The last time the commission did this was in 2017, so just a couple of years ago. And at that time, there were a number of concerns related primarily around odor, noise, and dust. And so what happened is this process started earlier in the year We heard the complaints that we were receiving. Tykert spent about 4 or 5 months reaching out with the neighbors, held a series of meetings, and came back in June with a number of revised conditions of approval, really to address the concerns that they were hearing. And at that time in June, the commission elected to have 2 one-year reviews, so foregoing the 5-year process temporarily and imposing an annual review in 2018 and then again in this year. So that was really in response to an interest to really understand if the changes and the new monitoring that's occurring with the 2017 approval was effective. And what we've done each year, last year and then again tonight, we'll be going over those changes to understand if the project remains in compliance. So again, what you're doing tonight is you're conducting the second of the one-year reviews as required by the Planning Commission back in 2017. There's really 2 things to focus on this evening. The first is the conditions that have been imposed originally in the 1980s all the way up to 2017. And tonight you have an additional request that you consider a request from Tykert to return back to that 5-year review schedule that was initially imposed back in 1983. And then we'll talk briefly about the complaints that we've received since the last time this project was before your commission. So I know my staff report had a number of terms that may be unfamiliar to some of us, myself included. This is something that's new to me. I've taken this over from Kirk, who departed in July of this year. So I've actually had to have a little bit of a learning curve. So what I thought would be helpful is just to have a couple slides that help orient your commission to the terms that you're seeing in your staff report. So SMARA is a term, I'll use that frequently. What that stands for is the Surface Mining and Reclamation Act. Short story on that, it's a state law. It's really the policy framework for both surface mining and reclamation. You'll see the term Ecozorb in the staff report. That's a chemical additive. It's a commercial chemical additive that is added to industrial processes related to controlling unsavory odors. DMR is the Division of Mine Reclamation. That is the state entity that administers SMARA. What we do is we provide annual reports to them, ensuring that the quarries that are under our oversight are in compliance with all of their requirements and our requirements. You'll see the term BMPs, that stands for Best Management Practices. There are a number of those discussed in the staff report, primarily related to hours of operation versus daytime versus nighttime, and then the use of watering trucks and other types of BMPs. And then I've got a couple pictures for you so that you can actually see the things that I'm talking about in my staff report. The one up at the top is the asphalt tank infiltration. This is something that's been installed, I believe, 2 years ago this month to address additional, it's targeted toward odor control. And I'll certainly let the Tykert team talk more about that if they like. And then what you see in the red box here are the acoustic curtains that we talk about in the staff report. Those are on top of the asphalt silos. These are a noise mitigation measure as well. Couple other things. Sorry, I couldn't help myself. Reclamation plan. That is really the plan that's in place with the quarry to return the lands that are mined back to kind of a usable and safe condition once the mining activities are complete. The staff report talks about a noise audit. This was a process done 2 years ago and really completed in 2018, really to understand if there were any additional mitigation or noise, I shouldn't say mitigation, noise reduction measures, if those were necessary or not. That took place and was completed middle of last year. We talk about squawkers. That was a new term to me. Those are something that you put on a piece of equipment that's backing up, but it's just quieter than the normal backup button or backup beeper that we've probably all heard. The term surfactant is in this staff report. That's also known as a dust suppressant. The idea here is that this is potentially something that could be used in place of watering trucks. And then again, just a couple other pictures. Yes, Harrison Ford is not fugitive dust, but the idea here is that this is dust that gets re-entrained into the atmosphere from the use of vehicles driving over dust particles and whatnot on the ground. So the idea here is that this is something that we don't want to see happening because, again, this impacts the air quality in the region. And then lastly, but not least, is the jaw crusher. This is a picture of the jaw crusher, and what you're seeing with these large boulders here is, again, a way to sort of minimize the noises that are coming out of that. That is a piece of equipment that takes large boulders and crushes them into smaller boulders and or pieces of rock, and I'll let that team elaborate if they like as well. So staff report talked a lot about conditions that were changed in 2017, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because the staff report does. What you see here is a list of really the main conditions that were either added and or modified from the 1983 approval. They really relate to ongoing and more frequent noise monitoring that's been happening for the past several years, the need to revise the dust suppression plan if necessary, and that would only happen if their operational characteristics were to change. We have a complaint log that is updated regularly and forwarded to the town. Again, the use of EcoZorb, BMPs that are focused on reducing odors that are being emitted from the asphalt. Again, that asphalt tank infiltration, so that's this system here to reduce odors. Water trucks for additional dust control, that the noise audit that I talked about, what we're calling kind of a driver education program. This is really alerting drivers to where they need to be driving, where they need to try to reduce their backing movements. There's some signage that's been installed to alert them to this as well. And then potentially, I think this happened middle of last year following the noise audit, that the traffic flow plan was revised in response to some suggestions that came out of that noise audit. So really, this is kind of the new framework for the existing use permit, and this is the focus of what we're going to talk about tonight in terms of, are these conditions working to reduce the impacts of the quarry? And leading right into that, what we're seeing is we think that there has been some pretty substantial improvement, in particular from what we saw last year. That being said, there are clearly still some complaints that we're experiencing. So in 2019, we had a total of 15 complaints, and that's really from a town complaint log that we monitor for folks that call us directly, and then from complaints received directly to Tykert at the plant. Again, we had a total of 15 of those coming from 5 separate residents. And these are folks that live up above in Glenshire and Juniper Hills. 11 of those were related to odor, 3 were noise, and 1 was a dust complaint. By comparison, if you look at the data that we have from last year, we had a total of 39 complaints coming from 9 different individuals. And again, 34 odor, 2 noise, and 3 dust. So I won't go into this in too much detail. What we're seeing is that these are mostly occurring in the morning. They appear to be related to kind of an inversion layer, that as the temperatures warm up, the odor dissipates, and previous investigations where we've received a complaint and gone out to site, we've done that a number of times. By the time we usually get there, which is probably 20 to 30 minutes, at least the staff, the planner that did the investigation, was really unable to detect any of the odors that were reported. So we had 3 noise complaints again this year. As I mentioned, we have quarterly reports that are submitted to staff. The reports that have been provided this year show that the quarry is in compliance with all of the town's noise standards. That being said, in the past, we have heard complaints related to the backup beepers. What's gone on is they comply with our thresholds, yet they're still annoying. And what also happens is that Tykert, the quarry, experiences outside traffic unrelated to Tykert itself, and in all likelihood, those pieces of equipment are not equipped with the squawkers that the Tykert equipment is equipped with. And then lastly, dust. We did receive a single complaint this year. In our correspondence with NSA QMD, that's the Northern Sierra Air Quality Management District, that is the government body that oversees air quality within our region. They've determined that Teichert has always remained in compliance with their standards. There's a lot of science behind this. I won't get into it unless you ask. But really what we're seeing is that this doesn't trigger any of the thresholds that are in place for air quality. And there is quite a bit of monitoring that's going on through that agency. So in summary, based on our review of the project in relation to the 2017 conditions of approval, we have determined that this project is, or that the quarry is in compliance with all the conditions. They, as we've talked about for the past couple of years, Teichert has implemented a number of mitigation measures related to reducing impacts, and I'll let Teichert talk more about that. What we will say is that to some degree there are ongoing complaints that we do periodically receive, in large part sort of in the fall when the mornings start to become cooler. I would say that based on the complaint log, which we showed here, that odor continues to be the primary complaint that we are receiving. I believe there is a new piece of equipment that Teichert is intending to install now and or very near in the future, and then which will be operational in 2020, and that is also intended to further address the odor complaints that we're receiving. So I also talk a little bit about the other agencies that are involved and the acoustic consultant that the town hires quarterly to perform the monitoring reports. They have all determined that the quarry remains in and has always been in compliance with these conditions. Again, what we're doing tonight is sort of the second of the two one-year reviews that are to happen. And then, as I mentioned in the staff report, we do have a request before your commission this evening to return back to the 5-year cycle. What that means, though, is that the ongoing monitoring, that all still happens. We just would not have this discussion in front of the commission every year. It would be every 5 years. And then just a note for your commission to understand, this is definitely unique from what you normally consider. You do have some limited authority in your purview this evening. And what that really relates to is that there is an underlying use permit that really dictates the project and the conditions of approval that we are allowed to impose. Unless there is substantial evidence to show that there are impacts that really relate to public health, safety, and welfare that are impacting the neighborhood or the surrounding area, we don't have a way to reopen up that use permit. Again, unless we find substantial evidence that the project is out of compliance, we don't believe that exists, so we've determined that it is in compliance. And without that evidence and or the applicant agreeing to reopen up the use permit, we really don't have a way to go back into any of the conditions to change them. The reason this was reopened up 2 years ago is because the applicant actually agreed to changing the use permit. So your recommendation this evening is to adopt Resolution 2019-25. Really, there's one thing for you to consider in that. It's that we would return to the 5-year cycle of reviews, again, with the notion that all of the required ongoing monitoring on behalf of the town and Teichert would still stay in place. And there's just a quick list of what is required there. That's all I've got. Unless you've got any questions for staff, I believe the Teichert team is here to answer any questions that you may have.
And will the applicant be making a presentation?
They don't have a formal presentation, correct?
Yeah.
But they're here to answer
You're available
questions.
for questions? Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, then let's move forward with public comment. If anyone would, Michael, did you want to speak? Yeah, please come up to the podium and introduce yourself.
Good evening, Planning Commissioners. Michael Smith from Teichert. Here this evening with me, we have a couple other individuals. Scott Myers, who runs our Martis Valley plant, as well as our Truckee Quarry plant. Jesse Yang and John Taylor from the law firm of Taylor, Wiley, and Jim Porter, who's also assisted with us on communicating with the neighbors in our community meetings. So just wanted to go through a few things. Obviously, Jenna referenced a number of items that we've agreed to and gone forth in this process. And certainly it's been a long journey since that snowy day back in February when we got snowed out of coming up here. And in hindsight, maybe it was for the better because to me, it brought us all together and forced us to kind of meet and address some issues. For the record, this is our third Planning Commission meeting in 3 years. In addition, we've had 5 community workshops that we have done on our own. And then I'd also just like to note that during that time and since the inception of this plant, we have not been out of compliance and we've not had violations on our plant. So we feel like we've always tried to be the best neighbor that we could. But at the same time, certainly this process has helped us along and created a better project for the community as a whole. And one other quick thing I just wanted to point out, and Jen, I don't know if you have the exhibit that shows kind of the reclamation, the one about the northern berm, but one of the other successes that we really didn't talk about tonight is that the northern portion of this property has actually been signed off as reclamation being complete, both the town and DMR. So certainly we've done some substantial restoration and reclamation work on this property and are starting to narrow down what's left and what's disturbed on the site. And maybe just an overview picture of the whole site would probably be easier. There we go. And if I can step away real fast, I'll just show you where the northern berm is. So this area here, and then all of that area has been reclaimed and met state standards under Surface Mine and Reclamation Act. So just in general, I wanted to go through a few things of what this operation has been for us and for the town. I mean, certainly we are a mining operation with an asphalt plant, and we primarily serve the Truckee market, and we do that by supplying a local supply of rock and asphalt. If this facility and our other local facilities did not exist, both rock and asphalt would come from the Reno area, enhancing, or not enhancing, but certainly adding more vehicle miles traveled to get the material up here, and certainly increasing the cost of building materials to provide for the affordable housing, which is so important in this region. We are the only local source of rock and asphalt plant, as we mentioned. In addition to what's on the surface, what you see here, we actually also accept recycled concrete and asphalt at this site. So folks bring their material in, we crush it, we send it back out as a reuse project to be used in road base and other projects in the community. So another savings to the town and use of material that otherwise would go to a landfill. So that's something that we're quite proud of, and certainly it's part of the business model. In addition to that, we also accept clean fill material. So a number of building sites around the region, when they have excess fill, they bring it to the site. We put it back into reclamation on our site and reuse that material, once again, helping it not go to the landfill. We've been very integral in both the maintenance and the construction of infrastructure for the town of Truckee, and we hope to continue to do that for a long time. Diving in a little deeper, just kind of go into what Jenna had mentioned. There's a number of things that I want to talk about, and this isn't a list of everything we've done over the last 3 years, but certainly everything that we've done, we've worked with the community, we've worked with the town. We consider these all to be voluntary measures, and as mentioned, they revolve basically around noise, odor, dust, and then a few miscellaneous ones. So with regards to dust, as it was mentioned, we updated our dust suppression plan back in 2018, and that resulted in several improvements that we did to the site. That included the use of surfactant, or magnesium chloride as we call it, which is a product we spray on the roads to help keep the dust down on those roads. The installation of the rubber curtains, as Jenna mentioned, which is both a noise, helps reduce noise on the top of the plant as well as dust that may come out of the top. We commenced use of watering trucks on non-operational days. So what that was about is on days when we were not operating, if the winds were intended to be high, if we had weather reports that we knew it was going to be windy, we actually put a water truck in place and had somebody go out and water our site even if nobody else was there, just to try and further keep the dust down and the site calm. We installed spray bars on our jaw and our conveyor belt, which is also kind of a misting system to keep fugitive dust down on our pieces of equipment. Certainly with noise, there were a number of items that came out of the noise audit. One of the big things that came out of that was the recirculation plan on site. What the recirculation plan showed us is that if we could move things around to where vehicles were not backing up facing the ridge, certainly those backup beepers at the time were a huge source of noise for the community up on the ridge. So not only did we redo our circulation plan so trucks were backing up away from the ridge, but as mentioned by Jenna, we converted all of our vehicles or any vehicles that we actually had to rent on our site, so ones that we didn't own, but that we rented, to squawkers. Certainly there were occasions when, as Jen also mentioned, where vehicles came on site, including your own trash trucks, which operated with normal beepers that we didn't have any control over. But anything that we could impress upon folks to change, we were able to do so. Another big item that we did almost by accident, but it worked out very well, was a huge stockpile of excess material was placed on the backside of the jaw, between the jaw and the ridge. And we found from talking to a couple of our neighbors up there, that significantly reduced what they felt were the impacts of noise on their residences. And these are ones further to the south up there. But that stockpile continues to grow and add additional buffer between the jaw and the ridge. And then lastly, and this deals also, and we'll talk a little bit about on the odor, but the idea of operating in the evening only when required by spec from a particular job. As you know, Caltrans has very, very particular requirements on closing roads. Often they require their work to be done at night. In the past, we would sometimes operate at night just because it was easier. We have stopped that, and we're now doing only specified jobs at night if required by Caltrans or public agencies. With odor, as mentioned, the addition of EcoSorb was something we first started with. That was a kind of a plant-based product that was put into the asphalt oil to try and neutralize the oil in the asphalt tanks themselves. To some success, we continue to work on that one. As mentioned, we limited the nighttime operations to when it's only required by spec. One of the other things was kind of the best practices. So knowing if we were going to have a nighttime job, we would actually batch our asphalt oil during the day, have it ready and in the in the storage tank, so we weren't running the asphalt at night, especially in the summer if folks may have their windows open. So we'd try and reduce any odors that they may or may not smell in the evening. And then lastly on that, at least at the time, was one of the big investments was the carbon filtration system that was installed on the asphalt tanks, which are separate from the asphalt plant. Those are the tanks where we store oil. The idea here was that we could capture any fugitive odors that may escape from those tanks. So not only did we install the system, the carbon system, which would capture and then run it through a carbon filter, we also rewrapped those tanks and put them kind of in an insulation blanket to further help. And then some of the miscellaneous items were, as talked about, we set up a new communication system whereby we have an email address. Whenever we were going to be doing night work, we would notify the neighbors. Any changes in our plant operation, we notify the neighbors. We used it to notify the neighbors of this hearing tonight, just to kind of keep people apprised as to what's going on. And then we also have the complaint log that was mentioned, where when folks call, we take that information, we respond best that we can to their complaint as to what's going on. That complaint log for record also includes the time, what the weather conditions are like, wind direction, everything that we can that we think that might help identify how we can further address the situation. That complaint log is filed with the town of Truckee at the end of each week, so they also have it for consistency. And in one case, we actually had some lighting that was facing a neighbor. We immediately took that lighting and redirected it away from the neighbor's residence. So with all that, we went to our planning commission last year. And in fact, I think Commissioner Hall, you were probably the only one that's been around for all this over the years. So one of the final comments was basically, you're an operation that's in existence. The neighbors are in operation in existence. Continue to work together. We took that to heart, and one of the things that we started doing this past year, unfortunately we didn't complete it all, but it shall be completed by the beginning of next year, was we made another significant investment, and that was in what we refer to as a blue smoke system. So similar to the filtration system on the asphalt tanks, we have purchased a filtration system to basically work in conjunction with the asphalt plant itself. So if you can kind of picture the asphalt plant, you have kind of 3 points of where fugitive odor may be escaping from. On the conveyor running up to the plant, at the top of the plant, and then at the bottom of the plant when it's loading out into vehicles. This new system is basically a capture and destroy system, if you will, where it captures those odors in those areas kind of in an enclosed system and burns that off before it ever is released into the air. It's been very successful in many other facilities around the state. We use it as well in one of our other facilities that has neighbors much closer. Our goal was to have that up and operating by August, but due to the late start in the season because of your heavy winter last year, we were very condensed in our operating year this year. We did our best to try and put it together. We did not, it's actually up and running, but we did not finish all the enclosures. Those enclosures, I believe, will be done sometime this week, if not next week, and will be fully in place by the beginning of the 2020 season. So that's something that's very significant in our mind. It was a very significant financial investment. I would say that between that, the original filtration system, and all the other things, in the last 3 years, we have invested well over $1 million in this plant to try and better cooperate with the community, try and make the situation as best as possible for all parties involved. And then maybe just a couple other quick notes on just operations. So for reference, our season has ended this year already. The only thing that is going on right now is we are actually running, one of the things that we do is we have a large pile of what we refer to as de-icing sand. But because it sits there all year and it's a little moist, we run that through the asphalt plant just to dry it. So you'll see a steam plume coming out of the asphalt plant, which is just the moisture wicking off of the dry de-icing sand. I believe that's also supposed to be done this week or next week, in which case then that will be ready for your winter season and for use by Caltrans. Normally our seasons are roughly March to April through November. As mentioned this year, we actually didn't get started till May, the beginning of May. So we had a very condensed season this year, a very busy season. A number of periods when we were operating 24/7. We also had some significant night jobs, which made for some long asphalt days, but we tried to do our best to work with the community. Beyond that, I would just like to thank staff and maybe just quickly recognize Kirk Skierski, who's not here any longer, with the town of Truckee, who was very helpful to us, I believe, and the community, and helped shepherding us into this new era, working with the community the best we can. Prior to that, I think there was some voids from all parties, and so we appreciate Kirk helping us get back on the radar with the town, and Jenna for stepping in on short notice and getting us where she is to, or where we are today. We concur with the staff report and would certainly like to request that we go back to 5 years. Would state with that certainly we have no objection to even continuing with the community and doing summer, like we've been doing these summer workshops with the community. Happy to continue doing those on our own with them as we've done in the past. And then maybe one other quick point, Jenna, and I don't know if you got this in your notes, but if it's the wish of the commission to go forward with the condition 32, there was that one change in the language on condition 32 under attachment A where it states, revert to 5 year, but submit your request annually. And I think that means submit your request every 5 years, if that's the wishes of the commission. And with that, happy to answer any questions. Myself or Scott or anybody from the team's here to help out.
Great, thank you. And would you mind sitting nearby,
Absolutely.
Michael? We would appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, if the other commissioners are in agreement, we'll move forward with public comment. Okay, so at this point, I'd like to open the hearing to public comment. If you have something you would like to share, I ask that you step up to the podium and state your name. You have 3 minutes to speak. Here we go. Thanks.
I didn't want to waste any time doing that. My name is Georgia Smith. I'm a neighbor. I live at the very end of Royal Crest Drive. Couple of things about the odor. There were, I believe, 11 odor complaints that were logged according to your notes, correct? None of those complaints were from me, because I knew others were making complaints and figured that I would be complaining about the same thing that they complained. Well, I didn't know that you counted the number of complaints as indicative of whether we improved from the previous year or not. I'm here to say that if I would have known that, you would have had at least another 20 to 30 complaints from me alone. This year, in my opinion, and I was around most of the season, most of the year, was much worse than the previous year. There was a solid period of at least 6 weeks, maybe over the August-September timeframe, where the odor was prevalent every day, certainly in the morning and often in the afternoon and evenings as well, that I noticed. I walk every day. I walk and I notice the smell. I noticed it walking out of my door. It was quite obvious. I do understand and appreciate the measures that have been taken to mitigate the odor, the noise, and the dust. Noise and dust are not a problem anymore, in my opinion, but the odor is certainly a problem, and I did not see any improvement this year. I saw a degradation. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Georgia.
Good evening. My name's Lori Tucker. I live on Royal Crest. I've been in the process from the beginning, and I do think there's been some improvements in my area regarding the dust, the noise, but the odor has gotten worse this year. And I think my understanding from the meetings, the blue smoke system was supposed to be installed this year. In addition, I don't think we're doing the community a justice by waiting another 5 years to review the odor. If Tigert and the plant has not installed that system, we would be not wise in revisiting this next year and really seeing if this is going to make a difference, because the odor is horrible. And I would invite any of you to come up and enjoy that odor and live with it every day. It's terrible. It's disgusting. It makes you want to actually throw up. It's bad. And I don't know what's changed. I don't know the whole operation of the plant, but I know living there, this year was absolutely the worst. And so I think I would ask that we should not just give Tigert 5 years to not review the situation until they follow through with the complete changes that they talked and guaranteed they'd do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mark Pato. We've lived on Royal Way for 21 years. We actually started complaining in 2002. A couple of notes for the history. One was that the original minutes of the meeting said that they would not exceed 2005, but those, despite the chairman at the time's insistence that there not be an extension, not even of a single year, it ended up not making it to the final contract with an indefinite amount of time leaving them to do this. I would say on the complaint side, some of it I would expect that some of it is sort of complaint fatigue. You know, we had brought this up, we had got a committee together to complain, so the complaints really rose a lot, but after a while you got to get tired of complaining about the same thing all over and over and over again. We did have, and it is true, the inversion layer is something that comes up in August, September, holds all the odors down, and then when the sun comes up and warms the upper atmosphere, it lifts, and then it hits the houses, and it becomes very difficult to even breathe outside. We did not get somebody here that usually goes out for a morning jog and has told us that they had to turn around because it was so toxic that it felt like it was impossible to breathe. So I would say that they've done a lot in terms of reaching out to the community. I think that They've made some improvements. They've obviously done a lot of work. It almost seemed like the EcoSorb maybe stopped getting added later on, or did it keep going? It kept going. So maybe it really is that inversion layer that makes it difficult. Last year, I would say it was equal to, but the prior years before they got the EcoSorb and the charcoal plant, it's significantly better. That was one of the things where literally, even with windows and doors closed, the odor would eke into the house. So it was that significantly bad. So better than that, but not fully repaired as we go forward here. And like the blue smoke, so what I would say is my recommendation would be not to give it 5 years and to come back until we see such significant improvement that you don't get a room full of people ready to complain before you give them a 5-year window. And part of the reason why that came up was they missed their 5 years. The council didn't go to them, they didn't come to you, so it just kind of went without anything. So nothing was being done until we started to complain. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Celia Sutton-Pato, and I'm a resident up on Royal Way. We've been here for 21 years, and I'd like to just, because I only have 3 minutes, I'd love to have more time to get into a lot, but I'd like to at least say that I don't believe that, despite what you've heard, that Tykert's met the nuisance mitigation goals for the conditions of approval to go on to the 5-year process. So the easiest one for me to speak to right now is the dust complaint. And in all honesty, I think you need to hear again, it's fatigue of complaining. And when I'm driving past this every single day and I see my house enveloped in the dust, I don't have my email right there for me. I'm driving and I have to get to work. So a lot of times I just call my husband or I say, hey, do you think somebody else is going to complain because I got to get to work? I called one day, not too much in the recent past, and I was told that the reason why they weren't using their watering tanks was because the water would freeze, and so they couldn't do the mitigation because of that. That's ridiculous. So if you can't mitigate the process with what you've got, it does freeze up here. I mean, in mornings, it's cold. So if we've got dust going, willy-nilly just because of that excuse, then we need to find other mitigation actions, okay? Secondly, I'd like to point out that the odors that people are talking about are actually fumes. I'm a physician. I've studied this a lot. These are aromatic polyhydrocarbons that are being emitted along with a lot of the other there's a lot of chemicals in those fumes that I've been told were going to be given to us as to what was actually in those fumes. What are the chemicals that we're breathing? And as of today, I've yet to get that scientific printout of whatever it is that you guys are putting into our atmosphere. So I do think that it started out better 2 years ago or a year ago. This year, I just felt like we're back to square one with some of the fumes. And one of the reasons was they were saying, well, our system, the EcoSorb and the carbon filtration system, wasn't enough for what Caltrans was requiring of them, what they were using on with their asphalt. And if they can't mitigate that, then I don't think we need to give them the 5-year approval, because there's just a lot of asphalt that's being produced out there now, much more. We are a growing community, and so the impact is on us, not downtown, not over anywhere else but in Glenshire, because the wind blows that way. It blows east. And so oh, sorry. I just want to say, don't give them
Sorry,
the permission
yes.
for the 5 years, please.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, would anyone else like to make public comment?
Hi, my name's Jim Dill, and my wife and I, Julia, we live probably as a crow flies the closest to Tykert, right on top. We're like the Flintstones living on top of the quarry that Mr. Slate ran. And, you know, and I grew up with Tykert, and, you know, I think we're all in a position here where we understand that Tykert's going to do what they're going to do on that property because they have use permits, and you guys can't control that, and we can't control that. And so I commend these guys because they're trying to help. But at the same time, I sit in my house, and you know, I had to be the 3 complaints for noise because we had a lot of backup beepers at 5:30, 6 in the morning because I'm up early. So I would call down, and I understand those are not your trucks; they're other trucks, but still, it's a nuisance. And I can tell you that at certain times when I'm hanging out with my other neighbor Phil and we're having a beer, and that rock quarry's going, when that crusher's going, it's rock and roll, and there's no way. And Phil actually had the sound monitor out, and it's above the decibels that are legal. But a lot of this stuff is they're not going to be testing during the exact peak hours. And we've had the sound guys were working off our property for a number of years. And depending on where you put the sound check and what time of day and what operations going on, I think there's a question there. There's a question of, are they really in compliance, right? When they test, they're in compliance, but are they really? I would say no. So a lot of these mitigation efforts have been put into place, and what shocked me, you guys, is, and again, just another example of Tykert doing what they're going to do, right, is last year, I believe, before the mining operation started, you guys moved the rock crusher a quarter mile closer to my house. 3 years, well, it was before 2018. It was after the 2017 meetings. But it wasn't like, hey, we're going to move the plant. And you guys moved it for a reason. The reason was that you needed to mine the property where the plant previously was. So here they put mitigation things into place, but then they moved the whole nuisance itself a quarter mile closer to the house so that the mitigation efforts are now degraded by the fact that thing's a lot closer to my house. So my question to you guys is, when you're done mining that property, are you going to move the plant back so that it's further from all our houses and so that the mitigation efforts can be felt that were put into place the year before last, but actually we lost the mitigation effect because you moved the plant closer to our house? So that's one of my questions. And I agree, I don't think the 1 year thing, I think, and these guys are doing town meetings, I'm cool with that. But we have to question, what they're doing down there and keep thumbs on them.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to make public comment? In the interest of time, if anyone else would like to make comment, if you could step up and wait against the wall, that might speed things along. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Joan Sarlo, and I live on the end of Royal Crest, right there on the bluff as well. And I've been at a lot of the community meetings with Tykert over the past. And I, too, will just say ditto on everything everyone said. It's mostly, for me, the odor. And I'm not calling all the time complaining, but when I do go outside and I notice it, I just go, wow. I can, it smells. It's a definite smell, and it has a toxic smell to it. So just like some of our neighbors, I would like to know, what are we breathing? Because as we know, it can be carcinogenic. We don't know. And anyway, I think a 5-year review is too long, especially with some of the things we've just talked about tonight. So I'm in favor of revisiting sooner and also having the community meetings. Thank you.
Thank you, Joan. Would anyone else like to come up to the podium? Okay. With that, I'm going to close public comment. And we're going to move forward with, actually, if the applicant would like to respond to the public comment, I could give you that opportunity. And we'll try to limit this to 5 or so minutes,
yeah,
please.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you for this opportunity. I wrote some notes here real fast, just kind of go through real quick. So the first one I have down, and Lori disappeared. Lori mentioned that we were required to install the blue smoke. Just for clarification, that was something that never came out of any hearing. That was something that Tyker voluntarily agreed within its own office to do in the winter of 2018 and put in place in 2019. We sent out a notice to all the community saying that we hoped it would be in place by August. We did not meet that deadline, which was our own imposed deadline, but it will be up and operational for the 2020 season. Having said that, it's obvious that maybe we need to see how that system works going forward. I'm kind of getting the gist that we should probably do another planning commission next year to address that. So I think we would be okay with the planning commission, another 1-year review, and then we'll request once again the 5-year review to see how blue smoke works. Let's see. Yeah, the EcoZorb, it's been constant, so I don't know. I honestly can't explain any changes between past years and this year as far as the odors that folks are smelling. We continue to do all the things that we said we have done. I don't know if inversions have been worse. It's just hearsay at this point because we haven't determined anything different that we've been doing since these items were put in place. The comment made about water freezing the ground, we should, once again, we not only do the water trucks for dust suppression, we do the surfactant. So the roads have been sprayed with mag chloride to keep things down. The water is just in addition to that. Both of those are items that we think combined help us out. When water does freeze on there, it's very dangerous for the equipment, obviously the trucks driving around on icy roads, especially in the dirt, or for the employees walking on those roads. So that's why we don't do the watering until it's warm enough for the ground to defrost a little bit. Let's see. With regards to the asphalt smell, I know that those are basically, we are regulated by their district. We have source testing that's done every 3 years on our asphalt plant. They have certified that our vehicle, or excuse me, our facility meets all state requirements. That's the rules that we have to play by, and we're in compliance without violations on those. Let's see. And then just maybe to note, one of the items with the backup beepers in particular, with the signage that we put in place, we've actually made it clear that we don't want outside truckers on our property and before 7 in the morning. So that was one of the ways we tried to address some of the early morning folks that were coming in. So hopefully that subsided a little bit as well. But having said all that, I think we're in agreement that if you want to go for 1 more year, we're happy to do so, continue to work with the neighbors. I think it is important to see where blue smoke gets us next year. Odor is obviously the largest complaint. And to Mr. Dill's question, there will be at some point in the future when the jaw crusher will move again. As mentioned, that it's in a location that has rock. Just to clarify, that crusher was in place before we started these community meetings. We didn't move it after we met with you, so it's been in place since 2017. So all the measures we put in place have been since it's been in its current location. We will probably move it again in the future. We absolutely will work with the community to talk about where we move it, how we orient it, and make sure that we do the best that we can. But it does sit on some reserves, so we'll probably move most likely further to the south because everything to the north is being reclaimed and we're moving our way further south. So with that, unless once again there's any specific questions.
Great, thank you. I'll have questions, but not at this time. Thank you. Okay. With that, I'll open it up to the commission asking questions of staff. Susie, would you like to start?
Okay, I did meet with Jenna. I had a bunch of questions earlier, and unfortunately, a lot of the answers came at about 3:30 today when my kids got home from school. So, I didn't have very much time to review the answers, but so I'm going to start with nuisance issues. I'm going to start with dust, and this is to staff. Our condition of approval 42 specifies the control of fugitive dust on non-operational days. Is there another condition of approval that requires it on operational days?
I don't believe there's a condition of approval, but that's my understanding of what they're doing as part of their operational plan.
Okay, and that's part of their required permit, possibly?
I believe so. I mean, all of the conditions are enclosed in your packet, but I don't recall one specific to that.
I don't either.
Other than it's part of the dust suppression plan.
Okay, but it is covered then and required. Okay, so then I'm going to move on to odor, and this is for staff. So, again, we spoke about this earlier, but I'm just going to do it anyway. Just asking if staff has considered the odor detection and quantification tool, don't laugh, called the Nasal Ranger, and if we could deploy that in sort of a proactive way. And we have all this data now on when we get complaints, and if we could sort of deploy somebody there early and to actually quantify this. And does that make sense? Can we do something like that? Can that help out?
Sure. Yeah, that is something that we talked about 2 years ago when we went through the use permit amendment process. There is a product called like what you just said. We don't know a lot about it. It is something that we talked through. One of the things we struggled with is the notion that odor can be fairly subjective. Some folks may experience impacts and others might not. It's certainly something we could explore further. One of the questions for us would really be what level of expertise and or training would we need for it to actually be a helpful measure. I don't know that we have enough information at this point to make a decision, but it's certainly something we could explore further, and or any other technology that might be out there. But I don't know that we know enough about it and how reliable it is.
So how would we move forward with something like that?
It would not be a condition that you could impose this evening. It would likely be something we would need to discuss with Tigert to see if they're willing to reopen up the use permit and require something like that. It's certainly something you could say that we could work toward if you do move forward with an annual review either next year or in 5 years or some other time, that we could try to pull together some more information on that technology. I mean, we didn't get very far in 2017 with our research.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm gonna take a step out of the nuisance issues for a second, and ask some more environmental questions. So is there a current regulation, if someone were trying to do a mine or a quarry right now, is there a current regulation on how close that could be to a creek or a water body?
From a CEQA standpoint or from a town regulatory standpoint?
Both? I don't know.
From a town standpoint, it would depend on what water body the quarry or mine would be adjacent to and how far away that would need to be. From a CEQA standpoint, it would need to be determined if it triggers a threshold of significance. I'm getting into the weeds here, on whether or not there's a significant impact that would be triggered by a quarry in proximity to a water body, and that would be determined through the environmental review process. I am not familiar enough with SMARA regulations to say if there's an existing regulation in place within SMARA that would allow or would not allow a quarry in a certain distance from a water body.
So then let's take a step back. You said if I were asking about a town regulation, it would depend on what the water body was.
It depends on what water body it is and how far set back the production would be required from that water body.
But that's the question I'm asking.
Well, so it isn't defined as, if you're at the Truckee River, it's 10 feet, 20 feet. We don't have that as a threshold within the community. It's usually done through, in this case, a use permit process. So through that process, you look at the specific circumstances of that property and then which water body we're talking about in order to figure that out. So if it's a tributary stream that we know the size of the property, that has kind of one setback, which could be 100 feet if the setback, if the floodplain hasn't been defined, it could be 20 feet. I mean, it just depends on which circumstance, and then that gets reviewed as part of the use permit. So I wish we could say, yeah, the town has a 100-foot setback for all waterways, but we don't. It's really specific to which one, the circumstances of the property, and what type of permit we're looking at.
Right, there's different standards if you're on the Truckee River versus other creeks or water bodies.
And even if you're downtown versus not downtown.
So I guess what I'm asking is, if this were to come to us today instead of originating in the 50s, would it be this close to Martis Creek?
Hard to say. I would suspect potentially not, given the stricter water and water quality standards that we have. But if you're not discharging into a water body, which is what this quarry does not discharge, there might be the ability to be in close proximity to a creek if, again, you're not discharging. But again, that would all be analyzed through an environmental review process.
Okay, so how does the property not discharge anything to the creek that is adjacent to it?
And I may defer to Michael, but as far as I understand, they are dealing with all of their wastewater and or discharge on site, and it's not infiltrating into the adjacent Martis Creek.
Okay, so that's wastewater, but is there rain runoff and snow runoff?
I would probably defer that to Michael if you're willing.
I can wait until he's
Okay.
up there as well. That's fine.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I just don't know. I don't know the answer to these things, so that's why I'm going to ask. Okay, so you know what? I think that's all of my staff questions. Thank you.
Great. Drusha?
I don't have any at this time.
Okay. Dave?
Only question I have for staff, and it's an engineering question. Do we, as a town, buy products from this? Is this where we get our asphalt and crushed rock and what have you to maintain our roads? And
I believe so.
Sand and all that?
Yes, I believe we're one of Tykert's biggest clients.
Thank you.
Okay, I have some questions. I think the first one maybe ties into where Susie was going, and I'm curious. My sense is this use permit that they received a very long time ago from Nevada County has no expiration. This is once
Correct.
you receive it, you are grandfathered in, and
Correct.
It is what it is.
It runs with the land.
Okay.
So it's a vested use at this point.
Okay. And then there was a note in the staff report in 1985, they installed a permanent sewage tank. Was that related to the sanitation district, or do you have any clarification on that?
Don't, but Michael might.
Okay.
That was just done, that was included from prior staff reports just to
provide
complete the background on the property.
Okay. And then condition number 3 referred to these discharge reports from Tykert and Lahontan Regional Water Quality Control Board. It states that the town receives these reports. Is that correct?
I believe we do, though admittedly, I've only been working on SMART stuff for the past couple of months, so I would suspect that they're in our files, which at this point are pretty voluminous.
Okay.
But
so
we could certainly look for them.
Yeah. Okay. And then the condition number 13, does the town receive these noise testing reports that were?
Yes, and 2 of them are enclosed in your packet this evening.
Right, I saw those. And to follow up on that, it looked like there were no noise monitoring in the evening. The 2 documents we received were both daytime monitoring. Was there a reason why we didn't receive any night noise?
I believe those times were pre-established a couple years ago with the changes. Michael might, again, I'm deferring to Michael a little bit, might be able to confirm that, but that's my understanding is that the times were agreed to prior. I believe we have some control over when Ballard is actually out monitoring and what time, so we could certainly take some direction from the commission if that was your choice.
Okay, I appreciate that. And then, let's see, I'm curious about the odor and wonder if, would you be able to describe this odor, or shall I ask Michael to describe it? I know when I drive, I live in Glenshire, when I drive to and from town, I often smell what seems to me the sewer smell, probably that I've always assumed is from the sewer plant or and they're, I don't know what exactly they're doing, but it's quite strong different times of the year. Quite often in the early morning, it's very pungent. But then I wonder, am I smelling the smell from the plant? Then that's not the sewer district's smell. So I wanted to get some clarification on.
So I would probably direct the first part of your question to describe the smell, probably to the folks that work on site and or Michael, who's there pretty often. As a former resident of Glenshire, I can attest to that the odor. I had always attributed it to the TTSA plant, and I think others do as well, and it's pretty commonly regarded to be the source of that. Certainly, having lived in Glenshire, I did not experience, and I did live on Royal Way shortly when I moved to Truckee, and didn't experience any of those smells. But so again, smell and odor are subjective, and I was there in the fall and didn't experience any of that.
So likely these are different smells, but I could get some confirmation on that. And then I did want to follow up on the one of the public commenters, and I had a question here about the toxicity of the odor from the asphalt, and kind of clarifying what is that people are breathing. And then let's see. I had the question about the nighttime study. Let's see. And then I think Michael confirmed that area to the north, the aerial you provided was previous mining locations that have been reclaimed, and it was in one of the first slides. There was an aerial of the plant. I can follow up with Michael as well. Yeah, so that all of that portion to the north that looks disturbed along the Martis Creek, that was previous mining area, and that's been reclaimed. Okay. Yeah, and then I have a question about the operations, but I can ask that of Michael. And okay, that's all for my questions of staff. Okay. Did anyone else have any more questions of staff before we move to the applicant?
Actually, I had a quick question on the berm. You showed the visual of the berm, and I didn't understand what you were showing there, actually.
It's likely because the picture is very small. This is actually from last year's presentation, and I just kept it hidden in case anyone had a question. So what you can't, I don't know if you're able to see that on your monitor, but this sort of yellow area outlines the area of where the berm was installed. And then, as Michael indicated, the berm is up in, correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, right up in here, where you kind of see a darker green area? Yeah, right here. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong, we have dual monitors and I was on the wrong monitor. right over here.
And I don't even know if this is sort of within our purview tonight, but in past meetings on this, we've discussed the landscaping of that to screen the site better from Glenshire Drive. Wasn't that a condition of approval that we decided to let go of?
To let
Well,
go
we
of?
decided, I think there was like a conclusion that what.
It had been adequate.
Correct.
Yes, right. So it's not a condition from 2017 because it was deemed, as I understand it, that had been satisfied. Is that correct, Michael? Is that a good way to characterize that? Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else for staff at this time? Okay, let's ask Michael, would you please step up to the podium so we can ask you some questions? Susie, do you have questions for the applicant?
I feel very tangled up here. Sorry, my microphone's over here, so I have to look away to talk. Okay, so again, I feel like some of these were sort of answered, but I had an hour and a half to look at it before I had to be here. So originally I was asking, do you currently? It didn't appear in the staff report that you were using this the chemical dust suppressant. So I've gotten that answer since then, and that's the
Basically, we call it mag chloride. It's magnesium chloride. It's kind of a salt, a natural salt that we put on to keep the ground compact, and it holds dust particles together.
And did you apply that? If that's a wet thing, like you spray it out, or is it clumpy crystals, or what is that?
I believe it's a spray, Scott. Is that? It's a spray. Yeah. Basically, a spray coming out the back of the truck, for the record.
Thank you.
Okay, so then this will tie into kind of what I was saying before. Like, I understand that you're not discharging anything directly into Martis Creek, but isn't this something that's going to then run off and make our creek saltier when it snows and rains?
And Jen, I don't know if you can maybe put up the exhibit again, just showing the site, because it kind of goes to the other question, I believe, which is setbacks off the creek. And so our WDR, our waste discharge permit, requires that all drainage, rainwater, everything stay on site, so nothing drains to the creek. As you can also see, that most of the mining has already been done adjacent to the creek and backfilled with some topsoil and so on. So we're really pulling away from the creek area, and we do have. You can see. I don't know when this photo is dated, but there's a couple green dots as well, which refer to on-site ponds. So we reforce all the water to drain to certain ponds and to low areas on the site. So nothing discharges to the creeks or water bodies.
Okay, so everything's draining internally. It's lower.
And even if adjacent to the creek, and you can't see it on here, but we basically have a rise or a berm that comes up to the creek. So anything that falls, rainwater, it falls and drains away from the creek. So we have a physical elevation change adjacent to the creek.
Okay, thank you. I do appreciate that. That makes more sense now that you cannot tell from the plan view.
An aerial doesn't really show you anything.
No. Okay, moving on. Oh, so it was described in two different ways: a liquid asphalt tank filtration system or a liquid asphalt infiltration system. Either one. We're not filtering the liquid asphalt. We're filtering the air that's coming out of that, correct?
Correct. You're filtering fugitive odors that are coming, kind of exuding from the tank, capturing it, running it through a carbon filter. We clean that carbon filter on a regular basis.
And that's, you put in a new carbon filter, or what happens?
Every so often we have to put in new filters, but you can clean them on for the life of the filter, which I'm not sure I know exactly how long that is, but we clean those filters until they become older enough, and then we have to put in new filters.
You clean them by washing them? What is that?
Would you mind coming up to the podium so
Sorry,
we can
Scott.
get you on the record? Thank you. And also our audience at home will be able to hear you.
Thank you.
Scott Myers, Tigert.
Every season we change our carbon from one. It's kind of takes from one place to the next and just kind of works its way out until it's exposed or overused, and then we take it out, and then we put it in a new section, and we just kind of work our way down as a filtration system.
Okay, so they don't get cleaned; they get moved from.
Yeah, they're taken out and put away.
So it's just a disposable product.
Yes, it goes into the recycle. It's just asphalt. So.
Oh, it's filtered.
It's the oil from the asphalt that goes into the recycle pile.
What?
Recycled asphalt.
I'm totally confused now. We are using recycled asphalt to filter the odors from asphalt.
You put carbon in, and then as it gets used to its last bit, then you take that out, put it into the recycle pile with all the other asphalt, and then we put new carbon in.
Got it. It becomes aggregate in your asphalt or something.
Recycled, yes.
Okay. Thank you. Let's see. Sorry. Okay. And so you mentioned, and again, you just mentioned it here, that the acoustic curtains are some sort of rubbery curtain. Is that, again, a disposable item? Is it replaced often? Is it a one and done? How often do you have to turn that over? Just curious about environmental impact on all these.
So I'll have Scott check me here, but basically it's old conveyor belt. Is that correct? So in a lot of our locations, and almost all of our locations, we convey rock to the plant via conveyor belt, so we don't have to use trucks. When those conveyor belts become old or outdated or unused, we just take those, we cut slices, we basically have hung them from the top of the plant, and that rubber surrounds the plant and kind of encloses the noise. It's an additional buffer for that noise.
Cool, thank you. And a nice reuse of materials. Okay.
Very much so.
So I've looked on Google Maps to look at the quarry. I have not been out there. But it looks like in spots, in one spot particularly close to where the rock crusher is, that it's within 50 feet of the Martis Creek. What would your assessment be of how far you are from the creek?
It's at least 100 feet from the creek to our closest. It's at least 100 feet from our closest piece of equipment.
Can we pull up that picture?
Or from the edge of the mining?
Yeah, from the edge of our mining.
Can we pull up that picture, the plan view? Thank you.
This is all stockpile.
So that's all stockpile on that side? That's not active mine stuff?
This is all recycle area right here. There's a big berm from here.
Okay, because I was looking at the creek that turns, it's like a right angle almost to the right, and there's a black dot right above it. Yeah, right above your finger. Mm-hmm.
That's just stockpile area. That's a pond, actually.
Of your?
Yes.
This is one of the places where you drain to?
No, we don't drain into it.
Susie, can you repeat what he's not on the mic, and so we're
Sorry.
not capturing what he's saying, and the public at home are not able to hear him. Oh, great, we're getting a, thank you.
There we go. It's on. This is a pond that we get our water out of to fill our water trucks.
Okay, thank you. And then again, while you're up there, can you just point out the end of the active quarry and where the beginning of the reclaimed area is?
This is all reclaimed from here. This is a repair area right here, and this is all reclaimed. This is all signed off by SMARA. And this is where we had a repair area that we didn't get enough growth in, so we're putting some fill dirt in there, some topsoil, so we can replant and make it right. We are currently mining from this side and from this area right in here. We are not doing any more mining this way.
Cool, thank you.
If I could just also clarify, Commissioner Tornay, so under our reclamation plan, we're required to do 5 years of monitoring. So once reclamation is complete, the fill material and topsoil has been put back in place, we seed it with native vegetation to the area. We have to do one consecutive years of monitoring for 5 years to show that that growth and the density and the proper plant material has taken shape in there, and only then can we sign off. So all the other areas we've met that requirement. In this area, we did not have the total density we needed, so we've actually added more fill material to that and more topsoil and replanted that this year.
Great, thank you. So it sounds like nothing's draining in there, but does anybody actively sample and test the water in Martis Creek, either above or below stream?
I know, I'm not sure that I can answer on Martis Creek. From our WDR, we have to do monitoring of groundwater on a regular, I think it's annually that we do that. Let me check here. I thought I had a note on that.
It was definitely in the email when I started reading through all that stuff. But
And then I should also note that there are several monitoring wells on our site which are actually TTSA wells, because the property is now in TTSA's ownership. So they monitor groundwater as well for a number of different constituents as well.
okay, and we're assuming since it's internally draining that it would show up in the groundwater before it showed up in the creek.
Yes.
Okay, and then I think I'm almost at the end here. Thank you so much for your patience. So what is the projected lifespan and future plans for this? It is scary that this is a permit that is open-ended.
So in all honesty, the rock we're nearing the end of the life of the rock plant mining. We have a couple more years left in there. The asphalt plant, as mentioned, will stick around. It'll be fed from rock that will come in from other quarries. It is we have a lease on the property with TTSA that expires in 2053. So it's anticipated that the asphalt plant would go until probably 2053.
That's a long time. Okay, thank you so much. I think that's all my questions.
A couple questions. Thanks. So the asphalt plant, you mentioned that has some time. Is there potential that could be relocated once you've halted the rock crushing and those other operations and move it further away from residences? Is that like in the realm of possibilities?
I think it's something that if the right location was available, it's very difficult because of zoning and your permits on this. It's one of those things that we have right now to try and relocate to another site. There would have to be some type of industrial zoning that would allow for this to exist. There isn't a lot of that in the town of Truckee.
But even on the existing site, try and push it as far away as possible from the Glenshire residences?
Yeah, in all honesty, I think first of all, we can't go north because everything north of where it says, for instance, the word rock plant, our lease with TTSA says that goes back to them, and they use that as buffer lands for their facility. So there really isn't, and then the southern part, that big round area, is a hillside, so there's not really a location there. I think the best we can do is what we are doing, which is continually working on how we can improve, put this new system in place, and see if that makes a big difference.
Have you ever had a reportable discharge event to Lahontan?
Not that I am aware of. And we have an environmental manager who's not here tonight. When the day got changed, a number of our people couldn't make it, but not that I'm aware of.
Okay, thank you. And then there was concern about what's in the asphalt emissions and in those fumes. Is that something that you can help provide to these homeowners?
Yeah, and I know what we've discussed is that the asphalt oil is it's something that's monitored by their quality district. It basically shows up in less than 1 part per million, which is it's an allowed use of material. I honestly can't answer that right now. I'll continue to work with the neighbors and see if we can better answer their question. But the best I can say at this point is we're regulated by the Air Quality Management District, and they've said that what we are doing is not illegal or does not pose a health hazard.
Okay, thank you. And then you mentioned the recycling operations. Is that an allowed use per your permit?
Yeah, I believe it's considered an ancillary use to what it is that where we're operating, and it's very common in mine sites throughout the state.
Okay, thank you.
And if I could, maybe you had mentioned another question. I wrote a note here on the berm. Yes.
Oh, thanks.
So originally there was a berm just north of the rock plant, and the realization came that from Glenshire Road, because Glenshire Road is so high, no berms in those areas really hid the operation. So we chose to actually do a berm also on the north end so we could separate the creek and the bike trail from the operation. So that was more of a visual. So folks enjoying, from a recreational standpoint, enjoying the bike trail or the creek would not have to look into the operation. And that berm has been completely vegetated. In fact, we have records on there. If you go by, the plant material and the tree growth is actually really starting to show up in that area. It's very noticeable.
Great. Good to hear.
Great. Dave, did you have any questions for the applicant?
No, Susie got them all.
Okay, great. I have some questions. To tie into what Drush was asking about the odor and the composition of the asphalt, and you're saying it's tested. Is it tested at the output of the machine, or do you know the location of where the air particles are tested?
So the town of Truckee has a testing station, which I believe is at the fire department. Is that
correct?
Yeah.
Fire department, the downtown
Yes.
on Commercial Row. Okay. If the public could please hold your comments, but
and
you could write letters.
For the record as well, there is actually a letter, a pretty lengthy letter from the Air Quality Management District addressing all these concerns when they came up in 2017. I don't believe it made it into the staff report this go around, but it was in the original staff report, which talks about the monitoring stations, how you would go about doing it, the fact that this site's been in compliance, the complaints that they've received, and so on.
So are you saying that there are no testing sites to the east or in any other location other than
Correct.
far west in downtown Truckee?
Correct, which is the case in most towns, is one testing site.
Even though the complaints are coming from the east?
Yes.
And is that something that we can, Jenna, I'm shifting to you, can we modify that at a testing site?
I don't believe we could.
That would be
under
something
the current use permit.
Tykert would Tykert be open to us installing a testing site on the ridge where the homeowners are complaining about the odor?
I was looking for that letter. The testing sites are, I believe, they're governed by the Air Quality Management District. They're hugely expensive. They require somebody to monitor them on a regular basis. The feeling was that it wouldn't give any substantially new information other than what shows up in the one already. So it would be one that I don't think would work for us just because of the cost involved.
But it doesn't strike you as odd that none of the complaints are coming from people living downtown, but all the complaints are coming from a specified location, and it would serve the community, kind of create this, good neighbor.
And obviously the complaints come because they're closest, they're on the ridge, and as we talked about, the inversion layers. But I think we feel confident in the report back from the Air Quality District that a new testing facility doesn't really serve you any additional information other than what they have already.
Okay. I had another question about the sewage tank that was installed. Could you provide any information about that? It was in the staff report from 1985. Is that something that you guys use, or is it just something that was put on the property?
I'll let Scott answer this one.
Just curious about the use and what purpose that was serving.
Septic tank for our office.
Oh, okay. It's specific to your operations. Okay. I had some other questions. The night operations. I know there's notification that's done. I'm concerned if, these continue to be more frequent? This is something that it's not there's no option. It's that you guys do this because Caltrans asks you to, or says we need this material.
Caltrans, Town of Truckee, or basically any other lead agency type folk, it's mandated in their designs that this work be done at a certain time, because of the flip side of that is that nobody wants to close a road during the middle of the day.
Uh-huh. And then you had mentioned trying to take care of some of these operations earlier than later to help with the noise, perhaps, and the smell.
One of the things that we kind of refer to it as a best management practice we put in place is to try and silo oil early, have everything ready so when those jobs occur starting at 10 o'clock at night or whatever, all you have is trucks driving through, loading up with oil and leaving the site.
And then I had asked a question about the noise. There was no noise study done at night. Is that something that we could have you do? I found it strange that it was only done during the day, and given that this is an issue.
Yeah, and I think Jenna referred to it, but one of the things that previously we were responsible for taking care of the noise studies, the quarterly noise reports. We agreed through this process to allow the town to run those. So we don't know. The only time we get a call like a week in advance, say, hey, are you operating this week? They show up, they do their reports. So the town can dictate when those reports happen, what time they happen, and actually the location of where the monitoring is done. And I know in this past year, I believe one of the monitoring sites moved from the Dills to a different site.
Okay, great. And then would you be able to describe as best as, maybe just from the information you've received, what the odor is? How would you describe the odor of the asphalt batch plant?
So first of all, I'm not up there. I know ironically you had made mention of a TTSA, and I know in talking with Scott, our folks actually have been smelling TTSA more. That's not to say that that's what the neighbors are smelling, because that's their their opinion. The asphalt oil, I can smell it if I'm on the ground. I have not been able to smell it up on the ridge on the times that I've been up there.
And can you describe what that smells like?
It's basically what you're smelling is the odor that's coming from the oil.
Is it like if you're stuck behind a diesel truck and you're inhaling those fumes? Or I'm just curious if you have any kind of way to describe what that smell is like.
Other than what asphalt smells like, I don't know that I can better describe that.
Maybe if you've received a complaint and you could kind of reiterate what the complaint said about that smell.
Basically, the complaints say that they call in, we can smell asphalt, as you've heard from the neighbors. That's about it. I mean, it's we smell asphalt, my windows are open, or I smell it in my backyard, things like that.
The smell of fresh, what we would associate with the smell of fresh asphalt.
Correct.
When a road base is placed and the oil is
which ironically in past years we got a number of complaints when the roads up there were being paved. So.
Oh, right, that makes sense. Okay, let me see if I have any other. And you had mentioned you're open to doing a review in another year to kind of address some of these concerns and to see the impact of the blue smoke system.
That is correct.
Yeah, okay. I think that's... I guess, this was a question that got brought up after Jerusha had asked about the intended sunset date of the operations, and you mentioned you have a lease until 2053. I guess my concern I'll express is that it would appear that the environmental impacts would be increased fairly significantly if you're having rock brought to you from afar as opposed to utilizing the rock on site. And it would seem like there might be a question about increased environmental impacts, and if there might warrant additional or further environmental review.
So I would respond to that, and that, one, it's in an industrial zone, so it's intended, the use was intended for these types of zones. Two, I would make the argument that if rock isn't coming from in the nearby area, rock or asphalt, you're bringing it from Reno, so the impacts on the road and the air emissions are even greater by driving it an additional 20 to 30 miles one way.
But I'm saying that when the mining ceases on this property and you're bringing rock in, likely from Reno, is that, or
No,
would you be bringing it in from the Boca Quarry or
from our Boca Quarry or our Truckee Quarry?
Okay, so the change would be to be bringing it in from your quarries that are fairly local.
Right. Once again, a local source of rock to serve the community and to save on trips traveled.
Okay.
Do you have rock crushers at those other quarries?
We have so at Truckee Quarry, we have a plant there. The difference at Truckee Quarry is you don't have the really significant boulders like we have here. So that's why the jaw is required in this facility.
And when you say Truckee Quarry, are you referring to the one at Boca or the Hurstdale?
The Hurstdale, it always gets confused.
Yeah.
So the one right around the corner from this that you can see from I-80, that's the cinder cone, which is Truckee Quarry.
Okay.
The one further up the road, which is adjacent to Boca Reservoir, is Boca Quarry.
And I live in Glenshire, and I hike out there a lot, and I've heard some really loud, like crashing noises in the past. I mean, is that maybe the sound I'm hearing on occasion? I have no idea what to call it. It almost sounds like some heavy construction or machinery, but it's like a big kind of crash.
If you're talking about something you're hearing from the Martis Valley Quarry or another one?
Yeah. I don't know where it's coming from,
Okay.
but I have heard these noises, and I thought, God, and it doesn't seem to occur as often as it used to. I've maybe heard it once or twice, but I've wondered what that is, and I wonder if that's maybe what I'm hearing.
Well, not knowing where you're hearing, what time of day, but the logical, so in the noise audit that was done, the two largest noise complaints came from the jaw, which we talked about. So most likely it's rocks, the big boulders being put into the jaw.
Yeah.
Or some of it also came from the asphalt plant. At the end of a cycle, what happens is you've got gates at the end of a cycle that they bang the gates together to knock off any loose asphalt so it doesn't crust up on there.
And that might be like a steel on steel
Correct.
sound. Okay, yeah, that would make sense. Okay, I have no more questions for the applicant. Yes.
I just have a super quick clarification. Once the land has been reclaimed, it is no longer eligible for mining?
Correct. Once it's been signed off by both the lead agency, in this case the town of Truckee, and also confirmed by Department of Mine or Division of Mine Reclamation from the state, the permit is no longer on that particular property. So what we've done here is what's called a partial sign off. We've only signed off the northern part of the property because the southern part is still active.
I'm just asking that there is no case where you would determine, it's actually economically feasible to continue to mine in the north, we're going to undo this reclamation.
If it's signed off, we can't do that, but I would also suggest that there's no rock left behind, so that's not a case here.
Thank you.
And maybe real quick, Commissioner Riley, you had also mentioned the discharge reports, and so that started in 2018, I guess. That was one of the new conditions. Normally, we just submit those back to the water quality state water agency. Starting in 18, we also copied the town of Truckee on those. So the town of Truckee does have the 18 and the 19 reports.
Great, thank you. Okay, does anyone else have any more questions for the staff or the applicant? No? Okay, thank you, Michael. You may be seated now.
Thank you.
I'd like to start deliberations if you guys are ready for that. Yeah, okay. Dave, would you like to start? Provide your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I think it sounds like that the applicant is doing everything they can to stay to keep up good neighbor relations, but also we do have I've heard public comment from the neighbors that they could do more. I do like the fact that the applicant has suggested that maybe we do come back in 1 year. So, and that seems like that would be a reasonable action for us to take tonight and give them an opportunity to get that blue smoke device in place and give them some time to see how that works, and hopefully we don't have many more complaints.
Okay, thank you. Drusha?
Great. I think there's been a lot of progress with the neighbors and Tykert, and probably a little bit more room for improvement. But I do feel like there's a little bit more just conversation, and I felt like at the last meeting the comments were worse, and it felt more adversarial, and so I applaud that. And yeah, thank you for coming forward with the recommendation to move forward with another year, because that's probably where we're going to land anyway. So yeah, great.
Thank you. Susie?
I do agree with those sentiments. I don't know if this has any bearing on the matter, but I am concerned about the open-ended nature of a 40-year-old permit. And in reference to that, like on finding 6, we're supposed to find that there is no potential significant adverse effects upon environmental quality and natural resources. And it's a scary thing to determine when I got a lot of the information that I requested probably about an hour before. So yeah, it feels like we're being asked to confirm something that we weren't given any data to confirm. So just for the staff, I would like, in the future, next year, if this comes back, when this comes back, I would like a little bit more documentation of that sort of thing. But I agree. I love that you've suggested bringing it back in a year. I think I would like to see if the blue smoke does anything.
Great, thank you. I'd like to say I appreciate the public coming out and sharing your experiences and kind of bringing this perspective, so it is more balanced, and we do get to see the people who are impacted by these operations. I appreciate Michael and Tykert making the effort to engage with the community and being amenable to changing this review period to continue the 1-year review. I think that demonstrates, a sense of wanting to work with the community. I think it's obvious we don't have a whole lot of ground to stand on. I echo your sentiments, Susie, but I also, I agree with having more data and more information. That being said, given the fact that there's these reports and all what we're being told, everything is in compliance, the noise, the dust, etc. But at the same time, even though these tests are saying one thing, the anecdotal evidence is that there are impacts. I'm quite disturbed that the air quality or the testing site is in downtown Truckee. I wish there was something we could do about that, because clearly the impacts are being felt in another location. I would like to encourage or maybe direct the town, as it sounded like per Michael, we could dictate the town to do night reports. I think that would be helpful. I know I would appreciate that. As well, it would be great to have more information on the composition of the asphalt oil and what that is from an air quality standpoint. What is being discharged into the air, even if it is okay per California standards. That's all I have. You look like you want to say something.
I do.
Okay.
I just, in relation to the air quality and the odor, I would really like to get some proactive measures on this and have somebody kind of stationed up there when we think it's going to be bad, and have them with this silly named tool. And it has to be the same person doing it, but if you have that consistency of the same person, we might actually be able to quantify the odor issue.
Right. So what is our, I recognize that's not something we can ask Tykert to do. Is that something we could direct the town to do or encourage the public to do and provide
with the nasal ranger idea, or
some way to track?
I mean, we have control of when we conduct the noise monitoring, either day and or time. So that is under our purview. I'm not sure if we were to change the odor monitoring, if that is feasible under the current resolution and discussion that we have tonight. The interest in moving to another 1-year cycle is doable, and I think it would be actually going back to the condition from 2017 and really just adding a third year. That would be the recommendation there.
So you're saying no about the smell? Because that was the majority of the complaints of the commenters this evening, was the smell and not really seeing a change in that.
I mean, it's not part of the resolution that's in front of you. It could certainly mean that if Tykert is amenable, we could talk through coming back, continuing the discussion and coming back and seeing if there is an opportunity to reopen this up, but it's not part of what is in the resolution for tonight.
And separately, the town doesn't have a person who could do this, and we don't have a pot of money to do this task with, sort of independent of Tykert. So if that's something that the commission's interested, we would have to have that discussion with council as part of our budgeting process of, is this significant enough that you want to prioritize that for us to find a person and dedicate time and money towards.
And the airport doesn't have a air quality monitoring system?
Not that I'm aware of. It's all done through the Air Quality Management District.
Any thoughts?
Could we add a condition? No, I know we can't add conditions. Could we somehow work towards coordination with AQMD to ensure?
I mean, we can definitely talk to them and kind of discuss this particular issue and see if they have any options within their funding or staffing or anything like that to help with this topic.
It seems like the right direction, especially since Tykert is indicating a desire to continue for another 30 plus years, and bringing rock from other locations and continuing with the asphalt, which is most likely the cause of this odor and nuisance. But that would be that's a separate thing.
I mean, certainly at next year's review, if it sounds like that's where the commission is headed, we could certainly work with Air Quality District staff to try to better understand what their process is. And I know we have some of that in our files already, and then work with them to provide more information.
Or even having them see if they're interested or available to come to, when we do the next review, to kind of just talk about the work that they do and how they do the monitoring. I think just for general public education would probably be helpful too.
It just feels like if we don't get ahead of that next meeting, though, we're just going to be in the same exact place, and we're going to have to push it out another year.
I mean, I think we can have the conversation with them now. I'm just thinking that, as we work through this and discussions, that either way, it's beneficial to have them come.
I mean, I was talking about reporting back at the next annual review.
Okay.
I agree, though, with what you're saying, not waiting. Michael indicated he wanted to come and say something. Are you guys okay if I invite him back, despite this being deliberations?
All I basically wanted to say is, I'm not overly familiar with this nasal ranger. The fact that we've agreed to come back in 1 year and we really do want to have the new system up and running, we'd love to give that a shot. And in the meantime, continue to work with the community, work with staff, work with the Air Quality District, just as an aside in our community meetings to see what we can come up with. And if we needed to put something in place for next year's 1 year, I think that would be the best approach. I'm not in a position right now to say, yeah, go ahead and we'll do this or do that, because I just don't know enough about it either.
Okay.
But certainly we do want to, the investment in Blue Smoke, once again, we're very hopeful that that will make a difference, and we'd like to see that operational.
Okay, thank you. Could we have the air quality district rep be part of the community meetings if the town is involved or invited? And
We can certainly reach out and see if they're amenable to that, but I don't want to
Right.
commit.
Can't
I don't know
speak-
what
you
their
can't speak
staffing,
for them.
if they're capable of doing that. I believe they're out of Quincy or Portola.
Oh, they're not.
They're not local. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Any other thoughts? Would anyone like to make a motion? I feel like we're all basically on the same page in terms of what we can do and what we can't do, and
So I think if you go back to the slide that's up on the screen, it would be adopting Resolution 2019, and instead of returning to the 5-year cycle quarry reviews, you would really go back to the language that was in the 2017 resolution. It's condition 32. And we would just make a change that it would be 3 years following the 2017 5-year review, and it would explicitly state 2018, 2019, and 2020. Those would be my recommendations if you're looking for an amendment to that language.
And I would add about night monitoring. I think since we're allowed to do that.
Or even afternoon, because this one ended at noon, right?
What ended at noon?
It looked
The
like on the
operation?
table that the noise monitoring went from 6:30 in the morning until noon.
Right. I was just concerned that there was nighttime activity that hadn't been. There was no monitoring at any time, but so I would imagine if we could open that up, I would agree to that.
I'm in favor.
How do the other commissioners feel if we added? Is it not I don't know what it would be. We enhance the noise monitoring.
I would dissuade the commission from including that as a condition,
Okay.
And simply state that you'd like to direct staff to use the discretion that's already been granted to us to do some night monitoring with Ballard.
Yes, please.
And that'll be in the minutes, and there'll be a formal record of that.
Yeah. Per the support of Tyker, right?
Sure, they've already, it's our decision.
Yeah.
They don't actually have control of that any longer.
Okay.
Okay, I'll make a motion to adopt Resolution 2019-25 with revised Condition 32 for yearly monitoring for 3 years, including 17, 18, and 19. And 20.
Could I have
18, 19, and 20.
Correct.
Yeah.
May I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Julie, would you please take a roll?
Commissioner Tarnay,
Yes.
Commissioner Hall,
Yes.
Vice Chair Riley,
Yes.
Commissioner Gove.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone who's participated. I do appreciate it. Thank you for taking the time and continue to keep this dialogue going and both sides, we appreciate that. That's how we make things better. So thank you. Okay. Let's see. It's 8:30. How's everyone feeling? We want to we don't have much. Let's just do it. Okay. Let me find my sheet. See where we're at. Oh, we have some any major items? No, let's see. Doesn't look like we have any major review. Staff reports, it says none, but if something came up, we could talk about it. No?
No.
Okay. Information items. Any information items?
Yes. So I'll just touch briefly on what we've got coming up for next month in December. We've got several development code updates that will be for you. We possibly have a interesting project on West River In our historic district, that's kind of a historic resource rehabilitation, historic demolition, though that's related to moving buildings, not demolishing them, and a tentative map. I don't know if that'll be ready. We're working on it, so that's possible that'll be on your agenda. And then we, in all likelihood, will have a tentative map time extension before you, and that's probably all that we'll have that evening, unless something unforeseen comes up. But we do have some things for December.
Okay, great.
That's it.
Thank you, Jenna. And do any of the commissioners have anything to report? Yes. Yeah.
I always have my standard, I have to page back. So this is November, last one was October. Since our last meeting, I went to Truckee River Day. The October 22nd Town Council meeting. Yeah. Did some webinars, one called Vacant to Vibrant, which was lovely. They sent me a free book as well. I started a project at the school, trying to expand some recycling projects, and so I did a little fundraiser, and some of our town folks have donated, and it was lovely. And honestly, I don't think... I went to the Transit Center relocation meeting, which was really interesting. I think you guys should come to the next one. There's 5 possible locations and 8 options. So that was very interesting.
How are those meetings being publicized?
Noticed?
Yeah.
I asked to be on the email for that one.
Okay.
So I got an email on it.
I spoke with someone downtown, but I didn't know about the meeting.
I will try and let you know next time.
I would appreciate it. I'm interested in that.
I did have a quick meeting with Hardy Bullock to see what he's all about. I went to the climate workshop November 7th. That was well attended. And then the last town council meeting. And it's all been very exciting.
You missed one, Susie.
Uh-oh.
I saw you at Good Morning Truckee.
Oh, that's true.
Is that?
I think I'm done.
Well
yeah.
done. Well done. Jerusha? Yeah. Dave?
I got married.
Woo!
Congratulations.
That's
I saw that picture. I didn't know if it was a new one. Congratulations.
Thank you. That's all I have to report.
That's a big one. That's a big. Will you give us a 1-year report in a year? We'll yeah. I don't have anything to report at this time. And let's see. With that, I am going to adjourn this meeting to our next Planning Commission meeting on Tuesday, December 17th here. This one.